Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Letterboxding with Commentatoring Nerd. This week is the final episode of my Years in Reviews series as far as decades go. I still have a 2022 episode left to do, but this week I'm going to do my 2010s rankings. So that's from the year of 2010 all the way through 2019. So the 2010s is actually, this list of the top 100 that I'm going to show you at the end of this episode is the very first list I really created for Letterboxd. There's a reason why I started Letterboxd and got so obsessed with all these list makings and rankings and getting more into reviewing movies and all these sorts of snowball effect of things. It originally started out on note cards, and then I put it on my computer in Excel, and then I was like, well, what do I do with it now? How do I share it? Because I want to be able to share this, and Letterbox became the answer. So then put the entire 2010s top 100 onto Letterbox from my transferring over from my Excel list, and it was um, that I've been tinkering with it ever since. It's one of the lists I'm most proud of, which is why I was so excited to do more decades top 100s this year to wrap up this year of 2022. Um, and also just take a look back at that list and really focus in on the different individual years. And I've watched a lot of movies since I first made that, and there's been a lot of changes as I've gone that I've already made, and then I even made even more changes looking back at it this time around. So every time I take a look at it, I feel like I need to shuffle some things around. So this definitely isn't a hard and solid top 100 that you'll be seeing, or even each individual year. The rankings that you'll see aren't necessarily set in stone. Definitely fluid. My opinions have changed through time, and things have fallen down and things have moved up, and that's just kind of the nature of movies and what movies you're a fan of. So really all of these lists I'm going to wind up revisiting, and the 2020s one is just one I've already had lots of time to revisit. So let's just get to it. Let's start with the year 2010. All right. One thing to talk about at the beginning of this is the 2010s is a really great decade for movies. It's certainly the decade where I got much more involved in watching movies and reviewing movies, especially the later 2010s. But looking back at the decade, the early part of the decade, 2010, 2011, 2012, and then to a lesser extent, 2013. For me, as far as the movies I saw, they fall within a little bit weaker as far as movie years go, whereas the back half of the 2010s are really, really strong, especially 2019, 2017, 2016. Yeah, I mean, pretty much 2016 on. That's the quality of movies is really deep, and there are some of my favorite movies in there. So whereas 2010 is a little top heavy. You'll take a look later at how many of my each year's made into my top 100, but not as many of these top films of 2010 made it into my top 100. So let's just talk about them a little bit quickly. The King's Speech number is my 12th ranked movie of this year. I don't really have a lot of strong ties to this movie, but I do recognize it's really well made, and it's just definitely about uh, Captain Barbossa himself being a supporting character, being a supporting role in this. Yes, I know Jeffrey Rush is his actual name, but just his performance in that alongside Colin Firth's performance, who's also very good. It's just makes for a really good movie, and there's definitely a reason why it got award recognition. There was maybe other things that deserved more award recognition than it did, but it still deserves some of what it got. Number 11 is Tangled. Within the newer Disney Animation Studios movies, especially the new Disney princesses. This is one of my least favorite of the grouping. Moana is more my favorite, and then Frozen even more so, or Frozen in between them. Basically, what it boils down to is Tangled is a actually a really solid plot and story, but the songs are kind of forgettable. There's maybe one song that really stands out, although right now I'm forgetting any of the names of the songs, which isn't really a great sign. I know lots of people really love this movie and they really love the songs, but it's just not as high on my list. But I still recognize it's a really good anime movie. It's my 11 of 2011 or 2010. Number 10, I've talked enough about The Social Network, but this movie I had held up higher on my list and my top 100 that we'll talk about later, um, because of its reputation, and it's got a lot of staying power, and it seems like an important movie, and maybe it still is, but I finally gotten the confidence and courage to just say, like, I'm not as much of a fan of this film as other people are. I definitely see a lot of the brilliance in it, but there's something that it definitely undercuts itself, and certain things don't age very well in it, even though one of its pros is that it does age well and it's still relevant. It's still a relevant movie, but when the final line of the movie is basically, "You're not an asshole. You just try so hard to be one." That just, I don't know. That is definitely not what we've come to know uh, Mark Zuckerberg to be. Number 9 is Troll Hunter. I really fell in love with this movie with Freak Out with Flags, as I've talked about on this channel before, and it's jumped up into my top 10 of this year. We'll talk about my top 100 later. It didn't quite make it, and neither did Social Network, but Troll Hunter is one of my favorite horror movies now, and it definitely holds a special place in my movie-loving heart. So it's number 9 of 2010. Number 8 of 2010, Black Swan. I've recently pushed this back up again. This is like one of Portman's best performances. She's one of my favorite actresses. Um, this is one of Darren Aronofsky's best movies, and just the combination of the two of them and Mila Kunis supporting. This is a really great movie, and it deserves more recognition from me, more recognition from lots of people. It gets a lot of recognition, but it can always earn a little bit more. So yeah, it's definitely a really great movie. Number 8, it's my number 8 of 2010. My number 7 of 2010 is Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Man, this is really all about the crazy cast that went on to be super famous in so many different uh, properties and whatnot. You have Chris Evans and Brie Larson and Aubrey Plaza and Anna Kendrick, and Michael Cera was already kind of popular at this time. But then lots of other people have gone on to bigger and better things. For Scott Pilgrim, Edgar Wright is a really fun filmmaker. Basically, every movie he's made, I've had fun with. So that's something to entertain you. I also really like just how this has video game stuff superimposed on the screen. It's not just video game stuff, but I really love how Edgar Wright really kind of puts a bunch of things, a text and whatnot, to kind of diagram out rooms and things. That's really awesome. And then of course Ramona's hair is exceptional in this movie and how it changes colors. That's pretty fun. Number 6 is Winter's Bone. Um, I'm going to be talking about a lot about Jennifer Lawrence in especially the early part of the 2010s. She is one of my favorite actresses and certainly was around this time. And Winter's Bone, I think, is actually her best performance. Uh, I think Silver Linings Playbook is really close, but this is one of the things that she thrives at, which is basically playing a teenager who has to act way older and wiser than her years, and it's a hard life that she is facing within this movie, and it's quite the brutal, dark journey that she has to go on. Um, but she does such a great job. She is an amazing actress, and uh, she's fallen off on from where she was at this point in her career, but I think she can definitely make a comeback, and it looks like she's working towards that for sure. Number five is Easy A. This is one of my favorite comedies of of this decade. Um, and Emma Stone is just hilarious in pretty much everything she's in, but definitely in this movie, she's a great, lead to follow. But honestly, this movie is I love it so much because of the touch of the Tooch that it has. Stanley Tucci is a wonderful supporting character as her dad. His one-liners in this movie make me actually roll on the floor laughing. Like I actually fall out of my seat and do it, not just say that I'm rolling on the floor and laughing, but I actually end up doing it. It tickles me that much. Number four is Kick Ass. Pretty much, there's a lot of great things to say about this movie, but really, Kick Ass comes down to Chloe Grace Moretz as Hit Girl being one of my favorite characters in anything. Um, she's just super impressive and fun to watch, and the action and everything is exciting. I really love this movie. Number three is Toy Story 3. This is my least favorite of the Andy saga. But I do think Toy Story movies should have ended with three. I don't think they should have made four. And it turned out that they shouldn't have made Lightyear either, or at least I wasn't pleased with it. I was super excited for it, and it definitely disappointed me. But Toy Story 3 is a really great installment. It's a perfect conclusion to the first three movies that people usually call the Andy saga, and just like the ending of this movie um, is so poetic and beautiful, but really sad. Um, but then even right before that, when all the toys think they're gonna uh, get melted or whatever, that is a like really tough uh, build up as well. That's really well done. The first half of this movie, I'm not as big on, which is why it's not as, which is why I like Toy Story 1 and 2 a little bit better than this one. But I can't deny that the ending is just perfection for this series of movies. Number two is How to Train Your Dragon. Um, this is the first How to Train Your Dragon movie, and this is one of my favorite animation trilogies or trilogies, period. Um, and really just all comes back to this first movie with the connection created between Hiccup and Toothless. That's what the franchise is all about, even though it gets bigger and more expanded with more dragons and dragons being more integrated into society. This first one is just so pure and innocent and lovely. And while I just love it as a starting point, and everything else is just off the backs of how great this first movie was. It's my number two of 2010. My number one of 2010 is Christopher Nolan's Inception. This mind-bendy, twisty, confusing sci-fi action thriller. Uh, I really enjoy this movie. I can't say I've revisited a bunch of times because it definitely takes a certain mindset to be able to sit down and watch this and be able to give it the time and dedication that you need to really focus in on it. But I love movies that are puzzly and stuff like this, and this one I definitely thought was amazing, and technically and visually it's an exceptional movie as well. Okay, we're moving on to 2011. So number 12, we have The Raid. It took me a really long time to finally see this. It was on my Real Regrets or Remedy list for a long time, but I finally did. I think it's a little over a year ago now. I can't remember exactly when I saw it, but this is a really amazing action martial arts movie. It's got a very simplistic premise of basically a police raid on this one building, and they have to get all the way up through the building, and there's lots of obstacles and people trying to kill them and whatever. Um, and it's really good. Um, and great action, choreography, martial arts within this. Um, it doesn't really need to be anything more than it is, and what it is pretty fun blast. Number 11 for me in this year is X-Men First Class. Um, this group of X-Men movies kind of wavered by the end of their run, but I really liked how they started off with these young versions of the X-Men we knew, with James McAvoy as Professor X and or Xavier, Charles Xavier, I guess, and uh, Michael Fassbender as Magneto. Of course, they kind of lead the show in this, and Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique. She and also obviously Jennifer Lawrence's relationship with this franchise is kind of soured over time, as maybe links to some of the reasons why she started to struggle and kind of fell off a little bit. But I still think she's good in this first one. I really like this group that they came up with for X-Men First Class. I think this is the best one. The first two of these early, like young X-Men movies that they came out with are definitely the best ones, and the other ones you can kind of forget about. But this one is my favorite of those. Number 10 is Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows Part 2. This is a great conclusion to the Harry Potter movies. Um, I do agree that they needed to split Deathly Hallows into two movies. If you've ever read that book, you know that there's not really anything you can leave out in that book, and it's massive. So even though, you know, chopping it in half doesn't lend the first half as well to its own movie because of just like how you're able to cut it apart, but you need all that key information to have everything work in the final movie. And this final movie does really work well as the final showdown at Hogwarts, basically the Battle of Hogwarts. It's a few other things in that, but essentially it is the big Battle of Hogwarts climax. And it's a really well done. I think they changed some of the order of things, but I was okay with all the little changes that they made during this. I think it worked well for what they're trying to do with the movies. Number 9 is Rise of the Planet of the Apes. It's my least favorite of the three, the new Apes trilogy, the Caesar trilogy, I guess we're calling it. This is the one that Matt Reeves did not direct, but it's also very good. Um, and yeah, it's my number 9 of 2011. Number 8 of 2011 is Fast Five. This is one of the best action movies that's come out in the last decade. It's definitely the best Fast and Furious movie. It introduced The Rock into the group, and um, yeah, it just made it the Fast and Furious even bigger. This is the reason why Fast and Furious has exploded into the batshit insane joyride that's become with the following movies, because they just get bigger and more crazy after this movie. But I think this is the one that does it the best with Fast Five, and it just barely misses out on my top 100 for the decade, which we'll see in a little bit. But it is here at number 8 for my 2011. Number 7 for 2011 is Crazy Stupid Love. This is a really fun rom-com that I was a little bit late to the party on. Of course, this is one of Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling's pairings, and they've got such great on-screen chemistry together. Obviously, in other movies, even more so than in this movie. But I really like all the characters' journeys in this movie. There is kind of like skeezy stuff in the first half of the movie, but that's sort of part of the character arcs and where the characters go. Eventually, they kind of make up for some of the stuff that's a little bit more, I don't know, toxic masculinity, and like how men think about picking up women and stuff like that. But they definitely make up for those things as the movie goes along. Steve Carell's really funny and amazing in it as well. Number 6, Bridesmaids, is also a really great comedy in the 2010s. It kind of Obviously, many of these women had pretty successful careers, but they were especially known either maybe they were maybe more for their TV work on sketch comedies or sitcoms and other things, and then a few people really started getting more and more work in movies after this. Kristen Wiig, um, obviously leading this movie, did go on to some other things as well, but especially Melissa McCarthy is the person who exploded from Bridesmaids. Some people think that's a good thing. Other people think that's less of a good thing. I appreciate that Suki from Gilmore Girls did eventually get her fame, um, and she's done some interesting things with that for sure. But she's very funny in Bridesmaids. Kristen Wiig's even funnier in Bridesmaids, and there's some great stuff in this movie. Number five is Hugo. I'm not a huge Martin Scorsese fan, but this is one that I do like. I mean, who can't love a little kind of kid who lives in a train station and just has all these little adventures trying to evade kind of police or whatnot, and he meets different random people within the train station, and then eventually he even meets an old film director, and we get to appreciate the history of film within this movie as well. And it's a wonderful combination of things that visually looks really impressive as well. Um, and it's just a heartwarming movie all together. Number four is Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol. This is my favorite Mission Impossible movie. Um, yeah, I really love Ghost Protocol. It doesn't only come down to the Burj Khalifa sequence in Dubai, but it pretty much is all about how ridiculous and crazy that is that Tom Cruise actually climbed on the outside of that building. Uh, it- I don't like heights, and that just blows my mind. Um, he's obviously gone on to do some things that are arguably just even crazier. And it seems like he's potentially going to one up himself again with the Dead Reckoning movies. We'll see how it goes. But this is really interesting movie. I also really like Paula Patton in this movie and Léa Seydoux in this movie. Paula Patton didn't wind up returning to the franchise after this movie, unfortunately. Obviously, neither did Léa Seydoux either. But they both are really good in this. And of course, Simon Pegg really exploded as far as his involvement within this franchise with this movie, and then Jeremy Renner entered the mix as well, and that was really gave a little bit of life to Mission Impossible movies. Number three is Moneyball. I really love sports, but even more than that, I really love kind of like what this movie is about, which is the management within sports. Whenever I'd play sports video games and whatnot, or I play fantasy sports as well, I always like care most about like maneuvering the roster and scouting players and um, drafting and basically developing a team over time, just like this movie's all about. And so I really love Moneyball, and it's really well done. Number two is Warrior. This is a great story about two brothers that have to face off against each other in mixed martial arts tournament. Um, Tom Hardy and Joel Edgerton really put on great performances, as does Nick Nolte in a supporting role as their father. This is just a really great movie from Gavin O'Connor, part of his kind of, I guess, sports trilogy with The Fighter, Warrior, and then the basketball one he came out recently. I'm blanking on the name, but forgive me. Number one of 2011 is Drive. This is Nicholas Winding Refn with Ryan Gosling in the lead. Ryan Gosling barely says a word in this movie, but he certainly can drive, and this movie looks exceptional, and the soundtrack is amazing. And it's just a really cool, gritty, neo-noir uh, crime thriller action movie. Um, it's really fun. It's a really good. Um, definitely the best of 2011 and one of the best of the decade. Okay, moving on to 2012. Let's talk about 12 movies in 2012. Seems fitting. I really like the Hunger Games books, and I like the Hunger Games movies as well. I've talked about being a Jennifer Lawrence fan. She is Katniss Everdeen. Um, the books are all in first person and Katniss's point of view, and even though the movies can't be that way, the way Jennifer Lawrence acts in that role, you can basically read and feel every emotion and thought that's going through her head, um, as if you're reading the book the same way. That's just how good of an actress she is as Katniss. She just embodies that role really well, and I just like the world that they created with the Hunger Games. I think they did a good job of adapting this first movie. Number 11 is Hotel Transylvania. This is a really fun uh, animation series of movies from Genndy Tartakovsky. Um, it's got a really dynamic style of movement and motion within the characters. Each character really has their own distinct style of moving, which is makes for a really fun action sequences within this animated comedy. And it's really funny, and I love the world that they set up with this monster hotel. And Selena Gomez is really great. Adam Sandler is really great. Andy Samberg is good. Good job playing as the human who stumbles into this world and falls in love with Dracula's daughter. You know how it goes. Um, but I really like this whole series, except for the most recent one, which was very bad, and they forgot what the whole franchise was about. But whatever, that happens. But I really like this first one. This is my favorite of the franchise, the series. Uh, Number 10 is Zero Dark 30. This was higher up on my list because I think it is a really well done movie from Catherine Bigelow and really well acted from Jessica Chastain. But just kind of like very military forward movies um, are not exactly the thing that I'm gravitating towards over some other things. So that's really it. I think it's a really well made movie. I really like how it explores Jessica Chastain's character being so obsessed and dedicated to tracking down Bin Laden and then eventually leading to the assassination of him. Uh, and this movie is really well made within that. So it definitely deserves recognition. It's just fallen down a little bit for me as I've wanted to push other things up in its place. Django Unchained is a really good Quentin Tarantino movie. Jamie Foxx in the lead, Leonardo DiCaprio giving a great villain turn, Christoph Waltz returning to Tarantino as kind of Django's sort of sidekick and helper. He's not playing a villain in this one, but he's really good in it still too. And then Samuel L. Jackson plays a really interesting character within this movie as well. It's a great action movie, great kind of alternate history movie as well, which Quentin Tarantino seems to like to do, certainly in the latter half of his uh, career, his movies that he's made. Um, yeah, so it's my number 9 of 2012. My number 8 of 2012 is Skyfall. This has one of the best Bond songs of any of the James Bond movies with the Adele song in this one. Um, and I think Javier Bardem is a good villain, but I think based on what he's done as a villain in other things, he could have been even stronger, which is maybe why I'm not like don't have Skyfall even higher up on my lists. But the third act of Skyfall is amazing, where he's kind of where he's basically defending himself in the manor, and yeah, it's really cool. Number 7 is Paranorman. I'm a big fan of Leica Animation Studios, their stop motion work, and Paranorman is one of their best ones for sure. I've already talked about Coraline in this series. Um, this one, I don't like this one quite as much as Coraline, but Paranorman is pretty awesome. It's basically like a cross between like Pet Cemetery, a little bit of Hocus Pocus, and some other things kind of rolled together. But basically, this is a really cool horror sort of animated comedy, horror. darker comedy, obviously, because it's definitely horror leaning, where kind of resurrecting things and mad science and really interesting stuff going on, um, paranormal stuff, as you will. And it's just a really fun movie from like a animation. I think it might be one of their best looking. It's between Kubo and the Two Strings, and this one as far as being the most impressive animation within like just like how it looks and pops off the screen. Number six is The Giant Mechanical Man. This is a very nice rom-dram. It's pretty sad and depressing, honestly, as well, because this is a story about basically two loners, kind of like who kind of feel on the outside of society. They're kind of going through depression and in a rut in their lives and separately, and then they kind of stumble across each other and form a romance, and they're great together. Basically, they can't really find themselves within their family, but they understand each other and they find companionship with each other. This stars Jenna Fisher and Chris Messina. Chris Messina plays a street performer who's basically on stilts and paints himself silver. He's basically the giant Tin Man, basically Mechanical Man. And then Jenna Fisher plays a zoologist working at the zoo, specializing in penguins, and it's just a really cute movie. Um, they have kind of sad lives, but when they come together, it makes it so much more heartwarming within that. Um, Number five is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Um, I was very late to the party on this movie. People have been telling me to watch this for a long time. Is on my Real Regrets to Remedy for a long time. It was hard to find at different points in time, but I finally did see it. I love seeing Emma Watson in things that aren't Harry Potter, even though she's great in Harry Potter, but she's really great in this movie. Logan Lerman in the lead is amazing as well, and I just really like how the coming of age story that this is, and finding your place within the world, and it being tricky. And Perks of Being a Wallflower does a good job with that. Number four is Silver Linings Playbook. Jennifer Lawrence's performance is award worthy in this movie, and I believe that she should have won, and she did. So that works. Bradley Cooper also is very impressive. I love, like, this is maybe a controversial movie now, maybe a controversial take, but I do really like how this is about two people with mental health issues that, you know, uh, it sort of is they form this relationship that even though they could trigger each other, they're also perhaps the only people that can really understand each other's experience because they both have kind of like these mental health difficulties, and uh, it may make for a volatile sort of combination at times, but I really like how they come together in this movie. Robert De Niro is really amazing in this movie as well in a supporting role as Bradley Cooper's dad. Number three is Wreck-It Ralph. I just love the world that they created with Wreck-It Ralph. I love the sequel. Um, and especially Sarah Silverman as Vanellope is great, but the whole cast of voice actors and video game characters uh, joining all the arcade machines together is just amazing and delightful, and I love it. Number two is Avengers 2012. I don't know. This had never been done before. Bringing this sort of team up together, nobody thought it was possible, and they did it, and they did it really goddamn well with this movie. Some people try to say that this movie doesn't hold up as well as it did when it first came out, and I just don't agree with that. The whole rest of the MCU, even though it's gone on to bigger and perhaps better things, um, has certainly expanded from this point. Uh, this movie, like everything else, is standing on the shoulders of what this movie achieved for the first time, and putting together this grouping. And this has some of the best quotes of the MCU. This is my one of the funniest MCU movies, but without being too um, like too much about the comedy. There is a lot of comedy in it, but the one-liners in this movie are so memorable, and I love it for that. Number one is a really special movie to me is Life of Pi. It's one of the most visually spectacular movies that you will ever see. Even though it's about a boy on a boat with a tiger, it's about more than that. It's also about spirituality and survival and uh, perhaps what I don't know how we perceive different situations and things, what is real, whether people will believe your story or whatnot, what sort of things will people believe when when you're trying to tell them about what happened, even if something exceptional and unbelievable happened to you, will anyone believe it if there weren't any witnesses, sort of thing. Um, those sorts of things go through here, but it's the music is beautiful and the visuals are beautiful around it. It's a feast for the senses for sure, and it's Life of Pi. And Ang Lee is one of my favorite directors, as I've already said in here. Uh, let's move on to 2013. 13 movies or 2013. The Conjuring. I was late to it, but I really like the first entry to this horror verse, I guess. Um, Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson are very good as these paranormal investigators, and I like the mystery and haunting aspects of this. And it's also really cool to see these child actresses who are kind of like Easter eggs now because they've gone on to do bigger and better things from the Conjuring franchise. Uh, as like they grew up as child actresses and now they're continuing to be really successful, and it's pretty cool to see uh, that within this movie. Then we get number 12. We have We're the Millers. This is a movie I saw a little bit later, but this is a really good comedy. Basically, this group of people uh, basically have to act like they're a family to basically be drug runners, um, and to do a job with that, and it's really crazy, but really funny. And this whole cast does a really good job. It's my number 12. Number 11 is The Hunger Games: Catching Fire. Um, kind of what I said about the first Hunger Games movie is pretty much what I would say about Catching Fire, but I really do like how they bring in the past winners to compete. It's horrible, but it makes for an interesting dynamic, and the team ups that they come up with for this from the book, from the source material, but then also actually how it plays out in the movie is really well done. Um, I like all the new characters within Catching Fire, and then it kind of kicks off the rest of Mockingjay finale. The Mockingjay movies don't do as good of a job because while I think there probably is enough source material to split that one book into two movies, they didn't do a good job of splitting those things into two movies. I don't think. Number 10 is 12 Years a Slave. This is a gut-wrenching, hard-to-watch movie about a man who's kidnapped, a free black man who's kidnapped and put into slavery, and it's basically his fight to get back free again. Um, and it's his 12-year journey to get back, basically. And it's really hard movie to watch, but Chiwetel Ejiofor is amazing in this movie. Uh, and so many other, and Lupita Nyong'o got recognition from this movie, and as she absolutely should. It's a really great movie from Steve McQueen. Number 9 is The Way Way Back. This is a great coming of age movie about like finding your place in the world and identity and self-esteem, and uh, it's interesting that he finds a sort of father figure in Sam Rockwell at this basically not exactly dilapidated water park, but he winds up working at this water park led by Sam Rockwell, and he becomes sort of this uh, unlikely sort of father figure slash friend buddy for this kid, and that he looks up to. And I just really like how this movie plays out. And yeah, it's a very heartwarming kind of coming of age movie. Number 8 is Frozen. Um, I think this is a great. Uh, I really like. I really think this is a great animated movie. Um, I don't like Frozen 2 as much. Uh, it has a few really good songs, but the story is a mess. Whereas Frozen 1, the story is pretty solid. They definitely like play into their Disney tropes, but then they kind of spin it on his head and make it more about sisters than any of the things that usually happen in Disney princess sort of Disney movies. And I really love that, and I think that holds up. And also, every single song except for maybe one are bangers. Obviously, "Let It Go" is overplayed, but it's still an amazing song. I can listen to the soundtrack for this movie over and over again, even though it's been played over and over again. But I still could listen to a lot of these songs more times. But what I think is most impressive, even though Elsa gets a lot of the attention, is actually Kristen Bell as Anna. It really is her story more, even more so than Elsa, even though Elsa's the one that turns everything frozen. But Anna is the one who is separated from her sister growing up and is wondering why she can't be around her, and then has this crazy, torrid love at first sight romance and this adventure to go track down her sister, and really everything's on the back of Anna to try to like um, yeah, save the day. And I really I love her in this movie. I love her in both movies, but especially in this one. Number 7 is The Wolf of Wall Street. Uh, this is some of the best, like this movie is basically Martin Scorsese giving into some of the things he does best, and some giving into some of his overindulgences as well. Um, Certainly, The Wolf of Wall Street is a lot to handle. There's a lot of partying and grossness, and I am not super squeamish, but there are a few things that I could have done without in this movie. But I do think it's really funny when he's on Quaaludes and he's trying to crawl to his supercar to drive away, even though the idea of him driving in that state is horrifying. But it's a very funny sequence of him trying to crawl to his car while on drugs. And of course, this movie gave us Margot Robbie. Um, this was basically her big introduction into acting world, and she's gone into so many amazing roles since then, and really got to thank this movie for that. Leonardo DiCaprio should have won for this role. This should have been his Oscar instead of The Revenant, but he eventually got it. It's just this one is definitely a much more impressive performance for him. Number 6 is Snowpiercer. Uh, this is a really interesting dystopian slash post-apocalyptic story. Basically, it's the world, what's left of humanity, or at least as far as we know, is contained on this train that's ever running. I don't know, around the world. It's a little unclear, but always seems like it's somewhere cold though. Uh, and basically, the train is segmented based on class. So like the one end of the train is the lowest class, and then as you move up through the different cars, you kind of go through the different classes, and each car has different special things. And it's just a really interesting world that they create within this train. It's really a microcosm of kind of classism in the world, and it works really well for that. And it's also a really good, gritty action movie as well. So that's pretty fun. Number 5 is Prisoners. Denis Villeneuve is one of my favorite directors, and this is one of his best movies. Uh, there's a lot of impressive acting in this movie, but this is really all about Hugh Jackman's character and how dark will he go to try to uh, find his son, his son who was kidnapped and is missing, and he has a certain sense of who it is that did it, but it can't be proven. The police can't prove it, and their hands are a little bit tied. But he's still super convinced it's this one guy. And he basically takes it upon himself to try to do something about it. This one guy, played by Paul Dano, uh, maybe gives an even better performance than Hugh Jackman does. Um, but um, the two of them definitely power this movie, and it's really well done. Number 4 is Saving Mr. Banks. I know this is a little bit of a controversial movie because it maybe makes the making of Mary Poppins glossier than it should be. But what I appreciate about this movie is that while they're telling that story, um, they're linking it back to her past and what about her childhood and her relationship with her father kind of led to her creating certain characters within Mary Poppins, and just how that sort of reflected in that story. Even though it was Disney-fied, uh, there was something to her Mary Poppins story that was very personal to her, and I loved going on that personal journey with her. Plus, also, you have Emma Thompson, Tom Hanks, and Paul Giamatti just doing wonderful, delightful things within this movie. And it's hard not to, and it's hard. I certainly can only love this movie. So it's my number 4 of 2013. Number 3 of 2013. If you ever wanted to know what it's like to be in space, just go to like pay somebody to put this back in IMAX theater, and if possible, also do 3D, because this was one of those that try to capitalize off the back of Avatar and being another spectacle in theaters, and this was one of the ones that actually succeeded, because you actually feel like you're floating in space and trying to go with Sandra Bullock in this movie. If you go and see it, you're just completely enveloped by the vastness of space and the gigantic Earth kind of in the background as she's orbiting around. It's a really amazing movie from Alfonso Cuarón. Number 2 is Her. Um, it might sound weird, but because it's about it's because it's about a guy having a relationship with the AI operating system on his phone, but actually the society uh, uh, it's actually fairly common for this to take place, and he's not really an oddball. I mean, he is an oddball, but and has trouble with social interaction. And I love how this movie dives into that. But really, a movie that's about a man interacting with his technology is really a movie that speaks even more about human connection and how people interact and connect and form romantic attachments and friendships and different things. And it's just a really amazing movie is Her. It's my number 2 of 2013. My number 1 of 2013 is gonna make you just gush with every emotion possible. It's either gonna have you overwhelming with joy and just put a giant smile on your face when it's going through the rom-com first half section of this movie, but then it gets down darker in the back half of the movie. Um, and the father son connections within this the fantastical time travel rom com is really the core heart of the movie, and the final act is all about that, and it's just gut wrenching and so sad. Um, it'll make you sob and weep and cry, ugly crying, by the end of this movie. But it's so well done. It makes you feel all the feelings, and I love movies that can do that. And About Time definitely can. All right, we're moving on to 2014. This is a really deep year of movies. I could have listed even more movies for this year, and I already listed 15, which is a lot. So you're going to start seeing that as we go from basically 2014 and up through the thing. I just have to include a lot of movies because there's great movies in the 2010s, and I want to talk about them. Hector and the Search for Happiness is a little bit more of an obscure movie with Simon Pegg in the lead. And basically, he's this guy who's not finding himself very satisfied with he's finding himself in a rut, really, and he wants to find happiness again in his life. And basically he goes on the travels around the world to try to research what makes people happy and sort of do like a little sabbatical, basically research sabbatical to do that. And it's just wonderful, heartwarming journey where he discovers things. There are moments that are harrowing, and he might even be fearing for his life at times, but there's also just wonderful ways that he connects with different people along his way, and it's lovely. And I love how it ends. It just really culminates really nicely for him and the characters within the movie. Number 14 is How to Train Your Dragon 2. Um, I already talked about why I love the How to Train Your Dragon franchise, but number two is really great. Introduces the mother. It is the first movie that really shows how dragons are now integrated into this society, and they're like actually like every person has their own personal dragon, and the dragons help do things like the everyday life, and it's really cool what they created with that. And that's what's special about this movie. The world expands a little bit too. You get another villain, but it's really about um, learning how this society led by Hiccup kind of but has really taken in dragons and made them a key part of their world. 13 is Kingsman: The Service. This is a crazy action movie comedy, very stylized from Matthew Vaughn. Um, this has some really gross humor, some really funny humor, some really dark stuff, but definitely a lot of great action scenes. Um, there is a whole sequence to Freebird that is one of the coolest fight scenes you'll ever see. Samuel L. Jackson plays a really good villain, and Egerton uh, does an amazing job as the lead of Eggsy. And of course, Colin Firth is great in this movie as well. Uh, I really enjoy this movie. I dropped it down a little bit from where I had it before, partly because of the sequels really soured me on the franchise as a whole. Even though I still really like this first movie, the sequels have been pretty bad, and there's other things that I wanted to give recognition to other than a Kingsman movie. Yeah, so number 12, we'll do The Grand Budapest Hotel. This is one of my favorite Wes Anderson movies. His production design is always exceptional, but this might be one of his best looking movies, as production design and cinematography, but this might be one of his best movies. This plot is super convoluted, but he definitely walks the line of being super convoluted and then sticking the landing at the end where you're able to follow along the whole way. And it just makes it really zany, a sort of a zany experience with how complicated things get. And that's what Wes Anderson does best. And he does it really great in the Grand Budapest Hotel with Ralph Fiennes in the lead. He does a great job. Number 11 is Gone Girl. I've talked good enough about Gone Girl on this channel already, but I definitely found a new appreciation for Gone Girl, refound appreciation for Gone Girl, I should say. Rosamund Pike deserves all the credit in the world for what she does in this movie, and I also like Carrie Coon in this movie as Ben Affleck's character's sister. Um, their kind of brother sister dynamic is something that holds me into the movie, even though I don't like Ben Affleck's character. Um, one of the reasons why I was lower on this movie at different points in time is because it sort of leaves a bad taste in your mouth at the end. It's not a fun ending, but it is an impressively done movie to get there. So I got to give it credit for that. It's my number 11 for 2014. My number 10 of 2014 is Paddington. This is the first Paddington movie. These movies are so cute. I remember reading Paddington books growing up. And it was amazing to see this little bear uh, who loves marmalade come to life and be a part of this British uh, English family. And the production design is so amazing in this movie as well to go along with it. Such bright colors that pop, and it's just a lovely little world that you can spend time with this silly little bear. Um, Number nine is one of the best sci-fi movies and time loop movies that you'll probably ever see, and it's Edge of Tomorrow, or Live, Die, Repeat, whatever you want to call this movie. But it's Emily Blunt is my favorite part about this movie. Tom Cruise is really good too. But obviously in a time loop movie, they have to spent pay really close attention to detail about so you can recreate the sequences in time and when events happen. And any time loop movie has to do that, but what they had to do to um, make all these kind of reliving the experiences happen is even more impressive because there's crazy big action scenes and uh, these aliens and whatnot, and it's a pretty insane big story that keeps repeating itself, and I love where it goes. Yeah, it's a really good movie, and its rules, while there's a lot of rules, but they do a great job following them, and you can track them as well, and you don't really get lost in them, which is important for a good sci-fi movie. Number eight is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. This is the best of the Dawn of the Apes trilogy, the Caesar trilogy. This is the first one Matt Reeves did. This is basically the civil war between the humans and the I guess it's maybe not called a civil war then, but whatever. It's basically the beginning of the conflict between the apes and the humans fighting. Obviously, humans have been dying out after the rise of the Planet of the Apes because of the disease they spread. But so apes have kind of taken over, but they're still living in the forest and they're not really like taking over human territory, but humans are dying out. So then they're that basically this two sides clash, and Tony Kebbell plays a really good antagonist within the apes, and then Gary Oldman plays obviously he's one of the best villain actors ever, and he plays a really good villain on the human side. That's really well done. That's Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Number seven is The Babadook. This is one of my favorite horror movies now, and I love this movie. At first, when I watched this movie, I just wanted to strangle this kid, much like the mom does. I completely understood, obviously, but this movie really speaks to that mother-son relationship and raising a kid with behavior issues, while the mother is also dealing with grief and emotional trauma that she's dealing with, and how that makes raising a kid with behavior problems even harder. And then there's this whole, haunting Babadook kind of uh, paranormal thing that goes along with it, but that is definitely secondary to um, the powerful family story for this mother and son. Number six is the Lego Movie. Everything is definitely awesome within this movie. No one ever could have expected that this movie would be as good as it was. They thought it'd be fun. Probably the best case scenario is it would be fun, and it's but kind of a throwaway movie. And it's definitely fun, but I would not call it a throwaway movie at all. Um, Especially since there's been sequels and spin-offs that are also really well done. This Lego movie definitely was a leaping off point for some really cool stuff, and I enjoy this movie. Number five is John Wick. This is the first John Wick movie. It's the most simplistic plot. It doesn't go very far into the whole continental and assassin underworld stuff, but it is a really amazing revenge action thriller. Um, and just Keanu Reeves as John Wick in all of these movies is amazing. He's really great in this first one. Um, and it's all about him, really. He's so good at the hand-to-hand combat and fighting, and he does so much of it himself. It's so impressive. Number four is Nightcrawler. Um, this is a movie about obsession and a guy who wants to basically take be a videographer for like car crashes and violent scenes or whatever, be kind of like the first photographers and whatnot to capture images for the news coverages when something big and bad happens, like a big accident or something or another emergency. Um, but this obsession gets a little bit the better of him, a lot the better of him, and he starts creating his own crimes to be able to beat people to the punch. And it's a very interesting movie and where it goes. And Jake Gyllenhaal is amazing in it. Number three is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Uh, this was really when the MCU started to integrate other genres into their comic book movies. So this is basically the spy movie treatment for the MCU and all the like this government's conspiracy and spy stuff woven in. I really love this movie for Chris Evans as Cap and Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, getting to team up and be a duo with so much of this movie. They're great at playing off each other. I wish in the MCU they got more work to do together outside of this movie. I guess it's basically this one and Captain America: Civil War where they really get to do it. And yeah, also this is one of the best scores in the MCU. Um, just the Winter Soldier theme itself, whenever I hear it in anything, because they definitely throw it back in other movies, it just gets me excited. And it's maybe between this and it's basically between this and Black Panther for the best MCU scores, hands down. Number two is Guardians of the Galaxy. Music is also very important to the Guardians of the Galaxy. The Awesome Mix Volume 1. But it's really about songs and song placement and the soundtrack more so than the score. Um, and it's honestly, the songs are a character in its own right with how well it works into the story. Even more so in Volume 2. The songs are mean even a little bit more to the plot. Um, but I just love this group of outcasts and all the mischief and heists and prison breaks and taking on some of the galaxy's uh biggest villains all in one movie. It's just a wonderful fun, and it's my favorite group within the MCU. It's my second favorite movie in the MCU, um, and I love it so much. It's my number two of 2014, though. My number one of 2014 is Whiplash. This is Damien Chazelle's movie, uh, breakout movie. It wasn't his first movie, but this is basically the movie where he started to break out. And this is obviously. Uh, this movie is Miles Teller, who's gone to a music conservatory to basically be a drummer and play in a jazz band as a drummer. And basically, J.K. Simmons is the instructor for this course that he's doing, I guess, is what it is. And he's this very overbearing, abusive instructor, and that's really what the movie is all about. Is what are the lengths someone's willing to go to be exceptional? What are the lengths a teacher who has this sort of mindset will go to push their students to that brink? And kind of the ethical nature of those things. But it's a really great movie at really taking a look at that and really calling out that sort of teaching as not being okay. But by the end, sometimes like we've glamorized this sort of thing in sports and other places, but we finally started to get away from that being more toxic than anything helpful for sure. And Whiplash is a good exploration of that. All right, moving on to 2015. We're gonna slide down to Spotlight. Spotlight won this year for Best Picture, and it's um, I've talked about before on this channel that I have a little bit of trouble with investigative journalists biopics or just biopics in general. There's a little bit of a like a ceiling they can't quite get past because they feel the procedural nature sort of makes them feel a little bit they can feel a little bit standard unless they have an extra special element. And honestly, this one's extra special element is this ensemble is one of the best ensembles of any years, but just the acting from everybody in this movie of the different reporters who track down this case is really well done. Um, and that's really the excellence of this movie, beyond anything else, is just really the acting of everybody in the ensemble. So it's deserved to be recognized on my 2015 list. And number 13, number 12 was sort of the beginning of the first big hit for Netflix original movies. This is called Beasts of No Nation, and this is starring Idris Elba. And basically, it's a story about this guy who basically raises child army, child soldiers to basically fight for him, and he's like uh, a freedom fighters type uh, group or whatever. And basically, yeah, he's kidnapping kids and bringing them part in his group and kind of brainwashing them to fight for him as child soldiers. And it's this really is following this one kid who and basically his journey at being indoctrinated, except he's definitely resistant to it more so than really anyone else. So we definitely see somebody who's being tried to get pulled into, but just won't give in, which is uh, interesting, but it's a very hard movie, but very good. Number 11 is The Big Short. I've talked about before with talking about the movie Wall Street that I do not know very much about finance and business and whatever. And uh, movies like this would just confuse me and I would have no idea what's going on. But The Big Short does a wonderful job of explaining a pretty complicated financial crisis that went on. Uh, and it really walks you through with clever writing and editing and whatever from Adam McKay and a great cast of actors to try to teach you about what happened in this financial crisis surrounding the housing kind of mortgages and loan kind of bad loan practices. Um, Yeah, but what I really love is they also have Selena Gomez pop in to explain even further to certain financial concepts to so that they make more sense to you, and I really appreciate that. It's very funny, and I wish more movies did something like that to help those people who are not very literate in that world. Number 10 is The Lobster. This is Yorgos Lanthimos' movie. This movie is really crazy. It's a very unique type of dark comedy. The first half of this movie is my favorite part because it's the most clear satire. But I just really love the intentional stilted acting that Yorgos Lanthimos has his people doing. Colin Farrell, yeah. Colin Farrell is a really great person to follow through this movie and basically this society and what it believes about human relationships and having to be in a human relationship and what people believe makes for a successful relationship and that you have to have something in common and or is it that you have to be complete opposites, or is it that? But basically, it's just this crazy world that he created, but it's really interesting one. And then the back half is all about like the people who kind of rebel that system and are outsiders and outcasts that are being hunted down by the people by the society and how it is. Um, and of course, there's a romance with Rachel Weisz's character, and Leia Sadu is a really intense character that does some pretty unforgivable things. Um, but she's very good in this movie, and uh, one of the reasons why this is kind of been up and down lower on my lists at times is because uh, the ending kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth, or it's a little bit vague and confusing. But it's obviously it's a very dark movie, and it certainly doesn't seem to have a happy ending, and that can be a little tough to sit with at the end. But it's a very well done movie, and I think I like it a lot. It's my number 10 of 2015. Number 9 of 2015 is Steve Jobs. This is Michael Fassbender portraying Steve Jobs. And he does an exceptional job. But what I love about this movie is how it's basically this slice of life for him. And it basically that you learn everything you need to know about Steve Jobs through this one moment, like this lead up, but before a big presentation for a product launch or whatever it is that he's preparing for, and it's basically him surrounded by all the people, all his assistants and people that support him, his yes men, and then some of them are yes men, and some of the people that kind of like he bounces ideas off of or whatever, or who've helped get him to where he is. Um, Kate Winslet is really great in this movie, as is Seth. Yeah, Seth Rogen is very good in this as well. Um, but I love how they just like boil down this day in a life of Steve Jobs. They do have flashbacks to the past, but it's really about what happens in this kind of one day or a few hours of a situation. It's sometimes it feels like it's real time lead up. Um, and I just love how that's how they tell this story. That's what I love most about it. And number 9 of 2015. Number 8 of 2015 is The Man from U.N.C.L.E. This is a wonderful spy action comedy from Guy Ritchie. Um, Obviously, Henry Cavill and Armie Hammer are really great in this movie as the American spy and the Russian spy having to work together. But what really makes this movie for me is Alicia Vikander as um, uh, this German woman who helps them with this case, and Elizabeth Debicki is a really good villainess as well. Um, it's just such a fun movie. It's very underrated and does get enough credit. So I decided to give it more recognition than even I was giving it, um, as you'll see in a little bit. Number 7 is Room. Uh, this is an amazing movie. Um, you might be surprised to hear, though, that I think the best part of this movie is the back half or final act or whatever you want to call it, where once they're actually out of this room that they're confined in and this boy grew up in, um, but basically how they deal with life back outside is what I think is most impressive about this movie. Um, it's just a great character study about trauma and development, about a child's view of the world and like what he's become to know and as his life, and then how it changes when he's like it, it's hard to kind of change those settings and things that you're comfortable and used to. And then as far as Brie Larson's character goes, you know, all you want to do is get out for a long time, and then you know a lot of the baggage and trauma that was in her life before this massive trauma that she's undergone for years and years, kind of rushes back as she's trying to get back to society, and that's almost as torturous for her. So it's been an interesting movie. Number 6 is Creed. This is actually probably my second or third favorite Rocky movie. Um, I really like how they continued the series with Michael on the back of Michael B. Jordan as Adonis Creed, Apollo Creed's son. I love his interactions with Rocky in this and Tessa Thompson in this. Um, it's just a really good. It's a really good boxing movie. It's a really good extension of the Rocky franchise. Um, Obviously Rocky 1's really amazing. I really like Rocky 2 as well, and Rocky 4 is just its own sort of special thing that you can't help but appreciate. Um, but Creed is also really amazing. Creed 2, I liked a little bit less, but it's still pretty good. But Creed 3 getting ready to come out, that looks to be like the best. It might be as good as this first Creed movie, so I'm getting ready for that. Number 5, Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Um, I know people want to, talk about this movie as just a rehash of New Hope and borrows a lot of things from Star Wars, but I don't really care about that. I love the new characters they introduce. I love Rey as kind of like our central focus, as far as the person going into like the the budding Jedi or whatever you want to call it. But I like Finn's journey as kind of being a stormtrooper who is awakened and kind of escapes and becomes part of the uh, yeah, this group. Poe Dameron, played by Oscar Isaac. Harrison Ford's in this, and it's just a wonderful movie. But it calls back to so many things, yes, but that makes it makes a wonderful nostalgic blanket that wraps this movie. And I don't know, it's a movie that for people who love Star Wars, I think it has the most, like, it's the movie with the most love for Star Wars built within it, and that's what makes me love it so much. I guess I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I feel about it, and I really enjoy this movie. One of my favorite Star Wars movies for sure. Number 4 is Sicario. Denis Villeneuve is a great director, and this movie's so tense, so dark, so gritty about basically American agents uh, dealing with drug crisis at the border, the drug war at the border, and basically Emily Blunt's character is this kind of bright-eyed newbie um, agent who's called in, and she's very clean cut by the books, but she kind of gets brought into this world that's about brutal interrogations and bending the rules. And Benicio del Toro is a wild card who may or may not commit unsanctioned assassinations frequently. Um, and Josh Brolin's really great in this as well. It's just a really great tense movie. They have some sections where they drive into Juarez, Mexico, and uh, it's this movie is so well done. It's one of my favorite Villeneuve movies and one of my favorite movies of 2015, and I love this year. Um, Especially the top of this year. Number 3 is Ex Machina. This is from Alex Garland. This was his first movie. He's really become a sci-fi master, even though he had a misstep with Men this year, at least in my opinion. But Ex Machina is an amazing movie. Um, it has Alicia Vikander in it again. This really was the year of Alicia Vikander because the what's it called? She had another movie that got her award recognition uh, this year, so that it's a really impressive 2015 for her. But basically, it's Domhnall Gleeson's character who's called in to basically do this AI test, and whether or not this AI can have convincing sentience, I think, is basically the idea. Um, I'm not like I don't even though the rules are very important, it's not, you don't need to be the biggest expert on robotics and AI and whatever theory to understand how this movie, but it's really about the interactions between him and Alicia Vikander playing the android, and then Oscar Isaac, who's the kind of eccentric billionaire tech inventor who's kind of uh, very skeezy and potentially unethical, immoral person with his creations, especially since they're exploring sentience of these beings. And, if so, then they're really being very mistreated. And it's really an interesting movie that explores it. And the final act is batshit insane. Uh, I feel bad for certain parts of the ending, but I also think it's uh, really amazing as well. So, yeah, Mad Max Fury Road #2. It's one of the best action movies ever made. The production design, the cinematography, um, everything just leaps off the screen at you, sometimes literally. Um, what a lovely, lovely day it was seeing this movie. Anytime I put this on, it's a great thrill ride. Furiosa, Charlize Theron as Furiosa, and Tom Hardy as uh, Mad Max, even though he can't speak for much of it because his mouth is chained shut, muzzled shut. Um, he's still really great at acting as Mad Max. And basically, this is one long uh, chase of a movie, and I love that that's that simplistic of a setup, but it works so brilliantly. Um, I can't even explain all the little nuances and wonderful things in Mad Max Fury Road. Many people have done it way, but could do it way better than me as well. But I just think it's a feast for the eyes, and George Miller. It's a George Miller masterpiece for sure. #1 is Inside Out. This is one of my favorite movies ever. It's just a movie that was made for me. I love animation. I love the concept of exploring why people do what they do, how people develop their personalities, and what memories are important, and kind of like these constructs for how our brain works and how we do things. I really love that kind of uh, making a concrete representation of that within this animated movie that kids can maybe understand, but also is really interesting for other people to try to understand as well. And I think it has some brilliant insights into how the human mind works, and it's just and it's also a heartwarming and very great emotional movie about like how the the struggles of moving to a new place for a, a kid approaching becoming a teenager, things like that. There's a lot of great stuff explored within Inside Out. That's why it's one of my favorite movies, and it's definitely my favorite of 2015. Okay, 2016. Um, I have a lot of movies because this is a crazy stacked year again. I'm going to go faster through these though. Hell or High Water is like a really good neo-Western sort of thing with a sheriff who's going after two bank robbers. It's just a really well done movie. It's lower on my list just because I like these ones better. It's really as simple as that. It's still a four-star movie. It's #16, but it's just this is a really stacked year, and this is just lower than some other things. Hunt for the Wilder People is one of Taika Waititi's movies. Um, this is a wonderful two-person show, although there's a great ensemble of New Zealand actors within this movie, especially the people playing the police that are kind of in pursuit or whatever. Basically, it's about Sam Neill's character, who's a reluctant foster uncle, parent, whatever. I don't know. It's a little confusing. And excuse me, Julian Dennison as the kid, as basically this troubled youth that's taken in, but then he runs away, and then Sam Neill's character tries to track him down, but then they wind up like staying out on the uh, together as a duo, kind of like staying away from everybody. It's interesting, but it's a great dynamic the two of them have, and that's what makes the movie. And I think, and obviously Taika Waititi has some great comedy and writing and within his movies. So that's definitely in Hunt for the Wilder People. #14 is Sing Street. This is a great coming of age musical about a group of kids, basically a group of kids um, writing songs and creating music videos for their band. And there's some exceptional music videos and exceptional songs in this movie, and that's what makes it special. It's got a good story as well about young love and infatuation, and also creativity and fame and things like that. It's a lot of things rolled into one, but it's really well done, I think. Number 13 is Your Name. Um, so many people rave about this movie, and I understand. I think it's really impressive too. It's one of the most gorgeous animated movies I've ever seen, both visually and emotionally. Uh, I lose there's somewhere in the back end of the first half of the movie where I sort of get det- start to get detached with the movie and the characters, but then the back half of the movie really comes together in such a strong way, uh, and like I said, the all the gorgeousness really culminates in this movie so well. It's got an interesting sort of sci-fi fantasy concept to it as well. That's really clever. Um, Zootopia is about a city that's all populated by people, by animals, and it's a giant allegory for classism and racism in society. And but it's really well done, basically centering around the story of Judy Hopps and Nick Wilde the fox teaming up to solve missing person cases within Zootopia that kind of speaks right to the point of predators and prey and the past relationships of animals, and that predators are like kind of the biases against predators in the society and things like that. So you can definitely see how classism and racism boil into one, but also there's things about like what jobs these animals should have, and sort of like not quite like that it's expected of the rabbits to all be farmers, or um, things like that. There's a lot of pressures about like certain people can't be certain things, even though this is supposed to be a world of opportunity. It can also be very restrictive as well. Number 11 is Moana. This is another really great Disney animated movie. The water animation in this is some of the most beautiful you'll ever see in any movie that has to do with water. Um, these are some of my favorite songs in any Disney animated movie as well. How Far I'll Go is really great, but also the Consider the Coconut song. It's not what it's called, but that's what I think of when I watch this movie and hear that song. It's basically the song that describes her village and like their society or whatever, but and how she doesn't feel uh in place with it, that sort of thing. But it's there's great songs. I think the plot's really fun too. It doesn't fall apart for me like it does for some other people. There's like one section with the coconut pirate little menaces that they run into that's a little bit extra, but that's okay. Um, it is still an anime movie that's mostly geared for kids, but it's really well done. It's got some beautiful themes to it. Yeah, number 11 of 2016. And number 10 of 2016 is Patterson. This is a wonderful slice of life movie for this guy who just goes through his routines, living his very simple life, and most of the time he just spends time sitting on a bench writing poems in his notebook. And he has his life with his with his partner, I believe, and yeah, he just goes about his life, and we get to watch it. And there is a point where I guess he feels like he needs to shake things up a little bit. And it's a little bit about like appreciating what you have in life and things like that. And it's just a wonderful story. And Adam Driver's in the lead, and Adam Driver is always amazing, even if it's in a movie that I don't like. I still usually like Adam Driver in those. Number 9 is Captain America: Civil War. This is a great way to bring basically the Avengers Civil War, the MCU the Marvel Civil War into movie form. It is a much smaller scale of like the pro-reg, anti-reg sort of thing from comics, as far as my understanding goes. But I think this is the best case scenario for putting it within the MCU. This does so many great things, I think, um, beyond just introducing Spider-Man and uh, Black Panther. You get to learn more about Bucky as Winter Soldier. Um, You the clash between Iron Man and Captain America is so amazing, and just that fight at the end with the two of them and Bucky, like every hit you feel in that fight, and the emotion along with it is really really strong. I think this is one of the best MCU movies. It's my number 9 of 2016. My number 8 of 2016 is Manchester by the Sea. This is definitely Stone Cold Bummer, the movie. It's about a man who's basically returning back home, back to the place that he called his home for a long time when his brother has passed away, which is already sad in its own right. And he's potentially going to have to take up um, taking care of his nephew. But this is also bringing him back into having to deal with what he's basically been running away from, which is the grief of losing his kids in a fire that pretty much he was responsible for. He and his drinking was responsible for, and he has to interact with his ex, played Michelle Williams, and just relive all that sort of stuff. And he realizes that, yeah. And anyway, he has to kind of deal with whether or not it's actually healthy for him to be back here and to take care of his nephew and all these different things. And it's a really hard movie to watch, but it's very well done, very well acted. Number 7 is Train to Busan. It's a really amazing Korean zombie movie. They are fast zombies in this, which I'm not always a fan of fast zombie movies. Um, but this one does it really well. Um, I think Korean zombie movies do zombie transformation the best, just the way the 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 actors move their bodies to basically turning into a zombie is amazing. Number 6 is Deadpool. This is just an amazing Ryan Reynolds vehicle. Uh, Getting to actually play Wade Wilson as Deadpool instead of what he had to do in X-Men Origins Wolverine, which was a travesty. Um, and it's just such this wonderful meta action comedy that's very raunchy in the best way. And yeah, I love Deadpool. It's my number 6 of 2016. Number 5 of 2016 is Moonlight. This could be a few spots higher or whatever, but this is an amazing movie. Obviously, this is known for being the movie that stole the Oscar from La La Land, more or less, or that La La Land was read mistakenly instead of Moonlight. Um, and yeah, but this is a really good movie about a coming of age story. Basically, it's telling the life of this one boy, starting when he's basically in middle school and he's being bullied and feels ostracized and alienated and gets sort of has to deal with kind of an absent mother, um, and then sort of finds a father figure in a drug dealer in the community, played by Mahershala Ali, and that's in the first chapter. In the second chapter, it's well into high school years where he starts understanding more about his sexuality and experimenting with that he's gay, and then but he's also still being bullied and ostracized and whatever, and that kind of comes to a boiling point as well. And then the third chapter is him as an adult and coming back in contact with the person he basically his love interest in the middle section comes back in, and it's a wonderful way to wrap up the whole story. But it's just a really great um, story about coming of age and sexuality and finding your place within the world and where you come from and so, things like that. It's a lot of things rolled into one from Barry Jenkins. Number 4, um, A Silent Voice. This is an anime movie that just blew me away when I first saw it. I didn't give it nearly enough credit when I first watched it, and then every time I think about it, I just like move it higher and higher up. any whatever list it is, whether it's animation, whether it's 2016, whether it's 2010s on the top 100. I love this movie so much. It's so heart. It's just such a strong movie. It tackles a lot of concept really well. It's basically about this bully, this character who is a bully to a girl, a deaf girl, and basically he winds up being ostracized, and he kind of winds up knowing what it's like to be live a life as an outcast, and then kind of like a few years later, they kind of are brought back together, and he can sort of have redemption, and they form a new friendship or whatever. But also, there's a lot of stuff about resentment and whatnot of like kind of rehashing those old wounds and whatever. But also, there's a lot of stuff about self-hatred and well, self-esteem and finding your place in the world and lo- like finding human connection and feeling like there's no one you can trust and stuff like that. It's got so many things, and there's some great ways through animation that they communicate these things, and you just have to see it for yourself. A Silent Voice is an amazing Japanese animated movie. Number three is The Nice Guys. This is a great Shane Black uh, dark action comedy. Um, It's Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe, two-man show, but also with Angry Rice as Ryan Gosling's daughter, who's pretty amazing. And yeah, it's just a fun action movie. That's pretty much what it is, but it's so fun. Uh, and both these two guys working off each other are a great duo. Number two is Arrival. Amy Adams is great in this movie. This is another Denis Villeneuve movie. This is one of the best shot movies I've ever seen cinematography wise, not just for the landscapes and stuff of the spaceships that have landed, but also just like even within the ship when she's trying to have her sessions of communicating with the aliens and how it depicts them trying to communicate with the like on the glass and in the mist, and all that is really cool. And then there's this really time bendy sort of like because the aliens are kind of non-linear time uh, have near time existence, and it sort of like bleeds over into the events and the worlds of the characters here, and things kind of it's really interesting how things all sort of wrap around within this movie in a unique way. It's kind of a tragic movie in that sense as well, but it's really interesting exploration of uh, so much stuff in Arrival. It's a great sci-fi movie. Number one is La La Land. I love La La Land so much. Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone are one of the best on-screen duo chemistries ever in anything. I love the songs. I love the music, the musical numbers, the dances. Just like that opening with everybody dancing on the freeway in LA is such a wonderful way to start the movie, and it just keeps going from there. And um, yeah, I love this movie. I know there are people who really don't like this movie, and I'm sorry for those people who don't like the movie because I love it so much. All right, we're on to 2017. This is one of my favorite years in film, so I have a lot of movies to talk about, but I'm going to talk about some of these fast. War for the Planet of the Apes is the third in that this Planet of the Apes trilogy with Caesar. Matt Reeves gets to do Dawn and War of the Planet of the Apes, and he does an exceptional job with those two films. Really is the strength of the entire trilogy is those two movies. Even though Rise is very good too. War for the Planet of the Apes is a great culmination of Caesar's story. Woody Harrelson's a great villain in it. There's just really good stuff still. A lot of good emotional arcs and things within it. Um, yeah. Number 17 is Ingrid Goes West. This is about Aubrey Plaza, and it's about obsession and stalking and friendships and social media and um, kind of creating a fake persona for yourself. And basically, Aubrey Plaza befriends Elizabeth Olsen's character, who she met she's like following as an Instagram follower, and then she figures out where she lives and basically uh, creates a friendship through false pretenses or whatever, and yeah, sort of gets into this obsession of being friends with this person, and it's just this crazy character study of this character, but also um, maybe commentary on mental illness and uh, just kind of yeah, how far people will go in these sorts of situations. But I mean, Elizabeth Olsen's character also has some things to explore within uh, how her relationships work as well. So there's a lot of good stuff in this movie, and it's really kind of gets crazy at times, but it's fun. Number 16 is John Wick 2. Um, this is where John Wick universe really expands and gets even more crazy. Um, and the action scenes are amazing. The kind of gunfight through the catacombs um, is so cool. Definitely the best fight sequence within that movie is definitely the most memorable part. But there's so many good things in the movie. A great installment to the John Wick trilogy, or well, John Wick movies, because we're gonna get more. Uh, and number 15 is A Ghost Story. This is a really interesting movie that basically a a guy dies, and basically it's told through the perspective of him as a ghost, basically being stuck and chained to this place where he lived, this house that he lived in with his white new wife, played by Rooney Mara. Um, and basically, he has to deal with kind of watching her continue to live her life until she decides to move away, and then he has no more connection with her, and he has to kind of just sit there and watch as the house sits there for a long time, but then other people move in and society builds up around it, and just kind of like this interesting uh, vantage point for seeing how things change over time. It's sort of like one of those like um, motion lap, like the where you speed up the image or whatever, um, and you kind of see something that takes a long, long time go really, really fast. It's sort of like that sort of experiment with a ghost story, and it's really cool. It's a very cool movie, definitely one of a kind. And there's not, I can't think of anything like this. Um, yeah, I definitely think you should check it out. Number 14 is The Shape of Water. This is Guillermo del Toro's movie about a woman who has, I guess, a romance with a fish creature, but that is definitely minimizing the story. This is really about just human connection and empathy and being able to listen to someone and communicate, like get beyond communication barriers and um, stuff like that. Plus, it's shot amazingly. Alexander Desplat's score is so so beautiful. Um, the production design, yeah, any Guillermo del Toro movie, the production design is great and cinematography is great, and that's no exception here. He also has great villains, and great villain in here is Michael Shannon as the bad guy. Number 13 is so that's about that. It's a really it winds up, Shape of Water is really winds up being a beautiful movie, even though people like to talk about it in ways that make it sound just uh, obs- obscure and off the wall. Um, but it really deserves people's attention. Number 13 is Paddington 2. Uh, I like Paddington 1 slightly better, but I like both of these movies a lot. They're just wonderful, heartwarming tales. I love the addition of Brendan Gleeson's character, and Hugh Grant's pretty fun too. Um, Yeah, I just love this little bear and his family. And even when he's separated from his family, it's just got a wonderful, heartwarming stories and hijinks. That's fun too. Number 12 is Logan. Uh, this is a very dark turn for Hugh Jackman as Logan and Wolverine. It's this old man Wolverine basically, and even older man Charles Xavier as well. And then there's Daphne Keene as basically this um, sort of basically an attempt to recreate Wolverine's abilities, and she's a very fierce little mutant fighter. And then basically it's a story about Logan trying to get her to safety and where a safe place for the remaining mutants that are around in this world, because this is sort of after there's been a fallout where mutants really have kind of lost the whole civil war of things and been tracked down and just are on the outskirts of society now. And it's a really interesting movie. So you're not going to see documentaries very much in my top 100 list just because, well, I don't watch nearly enough of them, but also I have a hard time ranking them and analyzing them and like rating them alongside other feature films, um, just because they're just completely different beasts. But on my yearly list, I will include documentaries, and Jim and Andy is and really blew me away with basically Jimmy. Yeah. Basically, this is about Jim Carrey looking back at the filming of Man on the Moon, and this is the behind the scenes of him basically living as Andy Kaufman for the entire production. It's about method acting and basically what he put through the entire crew and cast and director and everything, and the shenanigans he got into through there. But also, it has Jim Carrey really doing some reflections on himself, and gets into some deep topics about things, and I think it's really great. Number 10 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Um, I love this movie. I think has even more emotion and heart than the first Guardians movie, even though I like the first one better. But the father son dynamics, and not between Star Lord and Ego, but Star Lord and Yondu, really makes this movie the huge arc for Yondu's character in this movie is why I love this movie so much. And then also, like, Rocket gets a pretty great role. He teams up with Yondu for a little bit, but he has a good emotional arc as well. And you learn some things about a little bit more things about Rocket. And then you also get a little bit more about the sisterly kind of conflict between Nebula and Gamora, and just kind of their sibling rivalry, and like how they resent each other and wish they could have just been sisters that loved each other, but Thanos has pitted them against each other for so long. And yeah, uh, that's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. It's my number 10 of 2017. Number 9 of 2017 is Dunkirk. Christopher Nolan told this story about basically the Allied forces running out of room in France and getting cornered at the sea at Dunkirk, and basically it's about the miracle of Dunkirk and how they were all evacuated uh, with minimal losses, and it's basically the story about all the different ways they were trying to get people out. And but what's interesting about this movie is the time distortion. It's also what's confusing about the movie in the first act, because you're not really understanding what he's doing until you get to see through all the panels. And basically, uh, each group within this crisis, uh, some of their stories take place over a long period of time. I think it's the people on the beach have their, no, it's the boats coming from inland that have the longest journey, and it's that takes place over a few days, and then it's over a few hours for the people who are on the beach trying to get out, and then the fighter pilot is even shorter amount of time. But basically, for the movie to not just for able to interweave those things together, they have to really play with um, time and how they weave those things in. And I think Christopher Nolan does a really interesting experiment with this movie, and it makes for a good war film. And it's amazing in IMAX. It's a great it was a great theater experience. The sound design within the movie is as great as the plot structure, I guess. Number 8 is Big Sick. Um, this is a really unique uh, romantic comedy, but I guess it's based on a true story of Kumail Nanjiani and his wife, who's now wife, um, who um, actually did have this medical scare, but it's basically the story about how he had been dating her and then they sort of broke up, but then she falls ill and he decides to be there for her, but then he kind of starts bonding with his with her family, and it's sort of like it's got a little bit of like a while you're sleeping sort of thing, except like he does really care about her, and that they really mainly broke up because he was too afraid to introduce her to his family, who's Pakistan, like they're from Pakistan, and they're very like conservative about like him marrying a Pakistani girl or whatever. So that's the sorts of things he's worried about. And it's got really great things about family dynamics in this movie, and it's wonderful. Ray Romano and Holly Hunter play her parents, and they are great actors. And they are really good at playing. And Johnny and them, Nanjiani and them, uh, have a great dynamic uh, in getting to know each other. Number 7 is Get Out. This is Jordan Peele's directorial debut, and it might be, who knows, when he's all said and done, this might still be his best movie he ever made. But that doesn't mean he's not still making great movies. But this one he really knocked out of the park. Um, and it's sort of like a really, really dark version of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Um, and also like some other trippier, like, brainwashing and stuff sort of movies. But anyway, it does get a really dark turn. But what's really special about this movie is actually like how it comments on racism, but like the subtle versions of racism, although like microaggressions and like the racism people and biases people don't know that they show as well, but that comes through for Black people when they're interacting with any other person that's not Black, basically, and how they're treated. Um, yeah, basically people not really understanding how they come across, and um, it's a really great movie. And then they play off that to make a really crazy horror twist, and it's amazing. Number 6 is Tigers Are Not Afraid. I already talked about this movie a good bit with Freak Out with Flags. I fell in with love with this movie about these kids trying to survive on the streets of Mexico. Um, After their families are kind of like either kidnapped or murdered or whatever, and they're kind of left homeless and having to fend for themselves. And it's got a really wonderful, fantastical, like ghost story element woven in with this very real life, like hard struggle that the kids are going through. And it's a really great movie. It's become one of my instant favorites. Number 5 is Baby Driver. I've dropped this down a little bit. At one point, this is my number 2 of this year, because it's such a great action movie. But I got to be honest, like some of the external things attached to this movie with Kevin Spacey and Ansel Elgort, like there's definitely some people involved with this movie that it makes me drop it down, but I still really love the movie. I think it's a great action movie, and I love how they use music to incorporate with the car chases. These are some of the best car chases in any action movie I think I've ever seen. Um, and Lily James is great in this too. There's um, a lot of stuff to love with Baby Driver, even though there's some peripheral things that aren't so great. Number four is Coco. Every time I revisit any of my lists where Coco's involved, I want to move it up because I love this movie so much. It definitely has all the feels, all the emotions. I love how it explores like generational things with families and just like exploring the Day of the Dead cultural aspects as well is just so beautiful. That it's the best looking Pixar animated movie of all of them. It's really not even close. Like the Marigold Bridge and like the whole like if you zoom out and get the whole shot of like the Land of the Dead um kind of vista is amazing. But even just the details on the guitar and things like that are just so well done. It's a beautiful movie, both visually and just emotionally. Number three is Wonder Woman. I love Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I love what Patty Jenkins did with this first Wonder Woman movie, uh, and just how Gal embodies this character Wonder Woman, all the innocence of this character. It's so precious, and I like how her and Chris Pine as Steve, they sort of swap their own fish out of water sort of stories, and they try to teach each other about their worlds. And I really love their dynamic between the two of them. Um, Obviously, people always talk about the third act climax and how uh, it kind of tanks the movie, and it's definitely the worst part of the movie. But I love so much of the rest of the movie leading up to it that I can forgive that. Um, and like the sequence through No Man's Land is so well done. Um, it's yeah, it's really cool. It's a really cute, cool, and beautiful action scene, which seems like it's hard to imagine, but it they managed to do it. Number two is Lady Bird. Um, yeah, this is a great coming of age story. This is Saoirse Ronan at her very best, and she's a great young actress, and she's done so many great things already. But Lady Bird, I think, is uh, the best thing she's done. This is as much as this is a coming age story of this girl in the last year of high school. It's even more so a story about a daughter and her mother, played by Laurie Metcalf, and it's so much about their relationship and how antagonistic they are with each other, even though they both love each other, and that's apparent as well. But they also hate each other in a certain way, and that comes through as well. And it's really interesting, and it's about appreciating where you come from, and the beauty of all that and growing up. And it's such a beautiful movie. And Saoirse Ronan's at the center, which makes everything better too. Number one, and Greta Gerwig is an amazing director, and she does so much. This is my favorite movie from her so far, but she's already made uh, wonderful movies, and I can't wait for the Barbie movie. Number one from this year is Blade Runner 2049. I've talked about why I like Blade Runner, and certainly a lot of that boils down to how everything wraps up and the tears and rain monologue. But every single frame of Blade Runner 2049 I love. Um, it's a visually captivating movie, but also I just love the sci-fi and how they build the world even more of how things have developed since the Harrison Ford movie. Yeah, Harrison Ford is in this one too, but he could somewhat be an afterthought in this movie. Um, what I really love about this movie is right in the middle, there's two or three sequences back to back to back, two especially, and then there's probably a third one in there that I'm just forgetting. But basically, there's like where he meets the person who creates memories for replicants. And it's just really beautiful how she does what she does, but also how she um, looks into his memories or whatever. And wow, it's just an amazing scene. And then right after that, or right before it, I'm losing track of what order things happen in, but then there's the Ana de Armas like AI hologram thing that overlaps Mackenzie Davis's uh, prostitute character and basically allows Ryan Gosling's character to have a romantic encounter with the AI system with the AI person, which that seems really weird, but it's really a beautiful scene as well, and it just the cinematography deserved to win. Um, the score is really amazing as well. Yeah, so much to love about Blade Runner 2049. It's one of my favorite movies. Okay, we're in the year of 2018 now. Let's keep moving. Bad Times at the El Royale. This is a really visually stunning movie from Drew Goddard. It's got Chris Hemsworth in a villain turn. It's got Jeff Bridges as sort of like a bank robber who's disguised as a priest, and it's got Dakota Johnson looking really amazing, looking after her sister. But like more than that, like there's these wonderful shots of her just like aiming a rifle, and that is some of the best cinematography in the movie. And it's hard to look away from Dakota Johnson anytime, but in this movie it's even harder to look away from her. And Cynthia Erivo is amazing in this movie as well. She's has some wonderful singing moments in this, but also she just acts her ass off in this movie and really winds up being uh the main protagonist within the movie, I got to be honest. 13 is Annihilation. This is another Alex Garland movie. This is a great sci-fi premise and really gorgeous visually. Natalie Portman is in the lead with a good female ensemble along with her. But it's really all about the visuals and them diving into this dome, this mysterious dome place, and all the different like like defying the laws of physics that happen in there, or obeying the laws of physics, and but in ways that are unimaginable um, previously. And there's the scariest bear creature you'll ever see. The ending kind of falls apart for me, which is why it, it isn't higher up. Because visually spectacle, it's such an amazing looking movie. Number 12 is A Star Is Born. This had been higher up on my rankings, but I just felt like it wasn't as important to hold this one up. Yeah, it's basically the fifth retelling of this story. It's a really well done version. Bradley Cooper taking on the director hat, but also acting in it, does a really great job. But then, like Lady Gaga's acting debut, this is amazing acting from her. I still think any award recognition she got that year, she definitely deserved. And also, for sure, the song Shallows is one of the best songs from a movie. And it's so there's a lot to really love about this movie, but there's just some other movies that I wanted to push above it. So I did, and it's my 12 of 2018. Number 11, Mission Impossible Fallout is my second favorite Mission Impossible movie. That if you thought he was crazy in Ghost Protocol and all the other ones, Fallout really tries to one up all of them. Uh, like there's this action sequence with helicopters that I don't even understand how they did it, let alone have an actual human actor uh, be a part of it. Then Henry Cavill, has sound effects for his biceps when he's in a fist fight in the bathroom. That's a great sequence as well. Um, Rachel Ferguson is back, and actually even Michelle Monaghan's also back, which is fun. This is just a really great Mission Impossible movie, and it's my 11 for this year. Number 10 for this year is Damien Chazelle movie, First Man. This is a story about Neil Armstrong, and it's really taking a look at Armstrong, like not just as the astronaut, but in his real life. He was sort of a emotionally distant person, and there's good reasons for that because of a loss that he and his wife suffered. And Claire Foy is as good as Ryan Gosling is as Neil Armstrong. Claire Foy might be even better uh, in this movie as his wife and everything that she has to go through while he's trying to launch into space. Um, and also, this movie is like launching into space is one of the most visceral experiences. If you see this movie in a theater, you just vibrate with him in the capsule, and it's amazing sound design and cinematography and everything, filmmaking wizardry to put you in that position. It's a lot like I was talking about Gravity, but even more than that because you just really feel like all the shakes and bumps and the sound, the barrage of sound and things like that. So yeah, number 9 is Black Klansman. This is an interesting story about John David Washington and Adam Driver as police detectives uh, in Colorado infiltrating the KKK, or a segment of the KKK, and basically setting up a sting operation. And it's just a really good, tense movie about that. Really well done movie from Spike Lee. That's basically what there is to say about it. It's one of the best movies of that year. Uh, Even though it's my number 9, certainly of the award contenders, it was one of my favorites of those. Yeah. Number 8 is Game Night. It's a wonderful comedy. I've talked about how much of a Rachel McAdams fan I am, and I really love her in this movie. She's so underrated as a comedic actress, and this movie she definitely gets to show that off, and she gets to do that alongside Jason Bateman, who is an amazing comedic actor in his own right. Um, and just the craziness that ensues in this game night, friend game night gone wrong, is wonderful fun, even though it can get very dark and disturbing, but it's got such a great tone to it that I love. Number 7 is A Quiet Place. This is an amazing concept for a horror movie. Maybe might not be purely unique, but I love how they created this world and this family and how they have to soundproof everything. And the sound design in this movie is exceptional. The cinematography is really great. Um, John Krasinski uh, takes on a directing hat within this movie as while he's also acting in it, and he really knows how to film his wife. Emily Blunt is amazing in lots of things, but the camera especially loves her in this movie. And I don't think there's a movie where she glows more and the camera loves her more than in this movie. And she is so impressive in this movie. Um, they also have a deaf daughter who has really interesting things to do, both in this one and the sequel. That's uh, a really good character. So I really like this movie. Number 6 is Eighth Grade. This is Bo Burnham's writing and directorial debut for a movie, and he hasn't done another movie since. At least writing and directing. I hope he does another one because this one's amazing. It's basically like, I was talking about anxiety on film in other movies before. This is definitely anxiety on film for an awkward teenager going through 8th grade, and like she is such a socially awkward person, and you feel every ounce of that. I myself am a socially awkward person, so I definitely know it's like to uh go through things like that, but even like experiencing it through her, with her, in this movie is really tough. Um, and but it's so well done, and it really communicates how tough it can be to grow up in middle school, be growing up in middle school. It can be a really hard thing. And Bo Burnham captured that in this movie. Number five is Christopher Robin. This just hit me in all the right places because I'm a big Winnie the Pooh fan. And when I heard this movie was coming out, it was my instant, like, most anticipated movie of that year. And it just hit me on all the right heartstrings, tugged on all of them, whatever the right saying is. But uh, the voice acting with on Pooh and Eeyore and Tigger and Piglet and everybody is wonderful. And Ewan McGregor as Christopher Robin, getting to return back his kind of childhood imagination, is a wonderful way to like have like adulthood looking back on childhood. And his daughter is very cute. There it gets kind of crazy in the third act, but that's okay. It's a very heartwarming Winnie the Pooh story. Number four is Black Panther. Um, I just love the cultural infusion that this brings to the MCU, and of course, it gave us even deeper understanding of Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther and Wakanda, the Dora Milaje, and everybody involved. Of course, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever had to go on without Chadwick Boseman, who passed away, and the mantle had to be passed on. Um, but this Black Panther movie is so amazing. It nearly surprised everyone and took over Best Picture. I think it should have. Certainly, Green Book should not have won. Um, but it definitely won a few things, including Ludwig Göransson's score, which is one of my favorites in the MCU, as I was talking about before when I was talking about Winter Soldier. Yeah, this is a great movie. One of my best favorite in the MCU. Number three is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This is a great Spider-Man movie. This is a great animated movie, period. This is basically if a comic book came to life. Basically, if you like flicked a magic wand and like the comic book instantly like just came alive and spewed onto the the TV screen. That's what Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse would be, and it's such dynamic, amazing animation and a great story for Miles Morales as Spider-Man. This version of Spider-Man. Number two is Blind Spotting. This is really about how like two friends, uh, one of them is white, one of them is black, and one of them gets the two of them into a lot of trouble, and he doesn't understand how. Basically, he doesn't understand how his privilege as being white is basically just putting his friend at risk who's black. So whenever and this has already happened before, where Daveed Diggs's character has spent jail time because of basically. Um, Something because of his friend, and basically because he's a black man, he got into big trouble, and his friend really didn't get into any trouble at all. And that's just kind of how like they have a really interesting friendship and dynamic. And but it's really interesting to explore this sort of like how someone doesn't understand their privilege and how it can affect other people and even their best friend. And there's a lot of really great, powerful stuff in here. Daveed Diggs breaks out into rap in a few scenes. One in particular is one of the most exceptional scenes I think I've ever seen in a movie ever. Um, yeah, it's a really good movie. Number one is Avengers Infinity War. This is my favorite MCU movie. Um, all the spectacularness that Endgame is and the final finale of everything is really off the back of Avengers Infinity War and the bleakness that it came from. The guts that this movie has to basically allow Thanos to slowly win little by little and then win, like, have full victory by the end of this movie. Um, is just something I never thought I would ever see in a movie where the bad guy loses and you're left having to wait until the next one. And maybe there isn't even a resolution because at that time we didn't know what Endgame would be. We had suspicions that they try to reset things in some way, but we didn't know how or what or whatever. So Infinity War is something really special, and I think, um, yeah. it's my favorite MCU movie because of that. 2019. 17, A Marriage Story. This has slid down a little bit, not really for anything that is changing quality. I think Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver are just as good as they ever were in it. Um, I think it's a great story about divorce and how messy it can get. Um, I just like these other ones better. Um, Number 16 is Alita Battle Angel. This is a really amazing technical feat in bringing this motion capture um, Alita to life, played by Rosa Salazar, uh, who's amazing in this role, and it's a great sci-fi action anime, like partially animated movie. It's got great special effects. Um, I got to see this also in 3D, which it really enhances it. Yeah, uh, I really love this movie, and I want a sequel very, very badly. There are some things in this, especially with the little teenage romance, that isn't very good, and I recognize that. But there's so much stuff that that makes my jaw drop at how amazing it is and how much fun I have watching it. Um, that it's one of my favorite movies. Definitely, it's not really a guilty pleasure, but it's definitely a movie and I elevate maybe higher than I should. But I love it for what it is. And number 15 is Knives Out. We've talked a bunch about Knives Out right now with this with Glass Onion coming out. Ryan Johnson really kind of shifted the stereotypical formula of whodunit mysteries and kind of made it a little bit less about who did it, but rather how and why and how much that maybe there was a little bit more complicated things going on with how things transpired. Um, and it's also just this wonderful dissection of this upper class family and how horrible they are. And I love how black and white it is because they're just all horrible, despicable people. There's a little bit more gray in Glass Onion, which I can appreciate too, but I just love how awful these characters are and how they all get their comeuppance. Um, the one person I feel bad for is Jamie Lee Curtis's character, who I actually don't think she deserves losing out on stuff because basically she's the one being cheated on by her husband and she's the best business person of the group and kind of has done more things not with the help of her father and played by Christopher Plummer who and yeah and then Anna de Armas is just a delight in this movie and of course and then Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc is just a new Sherlock Holmes and Hercule Poirot for this generation, and I love it. Number 14 is Booksmart. Uh, this is Olivia Wilde in her directorial debut with Deaver and Beanie Feldstein. Basically, this is super bad but with girls and it's way better than super bad because it just is. Booksmart is basically about these two girls who's been um basically just spending all of high school trying to get the best grades, putting everything into getting straight A's and getting to good colleges. But then they realized that all their friends who had also been partying and having fun in high school also still got good grades and got into college. And they realize they've missed out and they try to fit all the fun and stuff that they didn't have into one crazy night of high school teenager debauchery. And yeah, it's a pretty crazy movie, but it's very entertaining and well done, and it really investigates their friendship as well. And yeah, number 13 is The Farewell. This is a really good movie about like culture clash. Aquafina's character comes from a Chinese family. She's since moved to America, but um, there's a family wedding that's coming along. So she's back in China with the rest of her family in China, and basically what they find out is that the grandmother is dying. However, the tradition in China is to not tell. Is that the family is let know that they're dying, and then they basically the tradition is that they don't tell that their loved one that they're dying, so that they can live out their last days to their fullest, basically, without the burden of knowing that they're dying. And it's supposed to be kind of a mercy or whatever. But Aquafina's character comes from, has been living in the United States, and it's a completely different world where, an individual has all their rights to their medical information, and they should have the right to know about like what's happening to them. And she's basically at like war with her family a little bit on figuring out what to do and whether to tell the grandmother. And there's a wedding going on within the family, and there's a lot of great family stuff in here and culture stuff in here. And I really like how it examines all those things. Number 12 is Peanut Butter Falcon. This is a great movie about Zach Gatsagan's character. He's a young man with Down syndrome who is having to live in a nursing home for like old people because there really aren't any other services to be able to support him, and that's the best sort of housing essentially for him. Dakota Johnson plays a worker there, and then but basically this character decides to run away and go find a, a WWE wrestler. That's his idol, so he can learn how to be a pro wrestler himself. And he runs into Shia LaBeouf's character, and they basically go on this buddy journey to trek through the um, yeah, kind of find their own way trekking to get to this wrestling school. And then Dakota Johnson eventually catches up with them, and it becomes this trio kind of like spending time together and traveling together and getting closer and becoming kind of like a small little family unit. And it's lovely how it kind of proceeds. Um, yeah. And number 11 is Midsommar. Um, you know, when I first watched this movie, I was really weirded out by a lot of the stuff that happens in the final act, and I was like, "Whoa, that really turned me off." Even though it like looks amazing and has some really cool stuff about exploring this cult in Scandinavia, um, and whatever. And Florence Pugh is acting her ass off, as always, but especially in this movie. This is definitely her best acting performance so far in her career. But I just realized all those things are so brilliant. Even the finale, as batshit as it goes, you just can't help but um, honor the movie as much as you can. So I've definitely pushed it up really way much higher than I had it in 2019 than I originally did, and in into my top 100 as well, as you'll see. Number 10 is Uncut Gems. Adam Sandler uh, deserved to be nominated for an Oscar for this movie. This is another anxiety on film movie. Just this character who can't help but get out of his own way. This is from the Safdie brothers, and they're really good at doing movies like this. Um, Basically, he is a jeweler who basically does whatever he can to like maneuver collateral and things so that he can get loans for placing bets on sports games. And then he has big losses and then is trying to get one big win to get it all back. And all that sort of stuff, and all these back channels and dealings and people he owes money to that are wanting to hurt him and stuff. And then there's Adina Enzel, who's his ex-wife, and then his girlfriend, and yeah, there's so much stuff in here, and I really love this movie. It's my number 10 of 2019. Number 9 of 2019 is John Wick 3 Parabellum. I know some people think that this just goes off the walls, like jumps the shark, so to speak, or jumps the dog. I don't know. The dog jumps the shark. I'm not sure. Um, but basically, this is an amazing action movie. Like the premise, we start off from chapter 2 is so cool, and we get that excommunication play out right in the first you know, 20, 30 minutes of this movie where it's just nonstop action of him fighting off people consistently. There's a second section within a knife shop that blows my mind, how great of an action scene it is. And then there's a scene later with dogs, trained dogs, attack dogs that is really cool how that's choreographed. Um, Again, these John Wick movies, the action choreography is so amazing and well done, and I can't wait to see more of them. This is my favorite of all the John Wicks, um, because of just how uh, above and beyond amazing action they do. Uh, I love the lengths that it goes to, how batshit it goes. Number eight is Klaus. I love how the idea of this Santa Claus origin story, and it's just about like how little acts of kindness can spread, even the smallest glimmer of hope or whatever, or kindness can turn like the darkest place into a wonderful utopia. And I really love how they show that change over time within this movie, even though like the kids are doing things for sort of an external reward, like them and a lot of the people in a town really internalize that kindness and doing things for their neighbors instead of fighting with their neighbors, like the town's history is. And it's a wonderful, lovely Christmas movie, and I just love watching it every. Yeah, Fighting with My Family is another Florence Pugh movie from this year. This is the year of Pugh. Um, of course, she was nominated for uh, Little Women and a supporting role. But then this is Fighting with My Family, and this is my favorite movie of hers from that year. And this is about the story of Paige coming, like how she came to be in the WWE. Her story about coming up through like the developmental, like uh, at Discover the next wrestler sort of thing. And Florence Pugh is just amazing in this movie, and it's a great story about family because she comes from this wrestling family, and it's like learning like about where do you come from, and but also being true to yourself and self-esteem and confidence and all these things that are really powerful. It makes for a great sports movie and sort of underdog story, that I mean, people love those, and I love them. So I love Fighting with My Family. Number six is definitely the most dad movie that ever dadded, but I really love it. Ford versus Ferrari is just a great movie following Matt Damon and um, this is just a great movie following Matt Damon and Christian Bale as race car. Well, one race car driver and the other a race car, basically like owning the team and the cars and building the cars, but the rivalry between them and the Ferrari and different European races, and they're trying to beat them at the Grand Prix. The Monte Carlo Grand Prix. And so it's just a wonderful build up to that in the movie, and it's very procedural in nature, but you're just drawn into like everything that happens in this movie, and the way they shoot the races and the cars, and Christian Bale and his family are lovely too. Yeah, it's just a movie I really like. Uh, Avengers Endgame is my number five. There is some messier stuff in the middle that has to do with the time travel stuff and a choice that they make in the end to try to get a good like end moment, but they kind of break some of their rules that they set up earlier in the movie. But I won't go really too far into that. But this movie is about the spectacle of the final act, and basically having the big everybody come together and come back from being snapped away, and you know Cap catching Thor's hammer and all the amazing moments that happen in that battle. It's just fan like the most epic fandom moments you can ever imagine are in this movie, and it's definitely a sight to behold. Number four is 1917. This is a great way to tell a story about World War One uh, uh, through visual storytelling. I mean, World War One is not focused on nearly enough because, like, the trench warfare is, you know, it's not as glamorous, or well, not that it's always, I don't know. It's a little bit of a messier war where things are less clear about who's right or wrong or whatever, and it's not like, you know, everybody fighting against Nazis who are, terribly evil. But 1917, they're fighting through the trenches, and the way they do the one take kind of stimulation through the trenches is one of the most amazing feats of cinematography and editing, even though you don't realize that there's editing ever, and it's the best way to depict like people in World War One moving through trenches and trying to get from place to place, going through no man's land and land and things like that, uh, and just like how tense everything is on the war front. Number three is Parasite. This is just so many things smashed into one. It's about classism. It's a crime movie about con artists, I guess, and um, it's like a dark comedy as well, and it becomes a horror movie at one point. And uh, I don't know, Parasite is so cool. There's a sequence where uh, there's a rainstorm, and it's like a delight for people up on top that are rich, up really high up top on the hills, and then for everybody down below who's lower class, it's like a torrential downpour and it's destroying their homes, and it's like the worst thing. And just like it just is a great way to depict the inequality within society that so often happens, and it's just Parasite is so good at pointing out those sorts of things. Number two is Jojo Rabbit. It's just a wonderful story. This movie probably shouldn't work. It's Taika Waititi trying to tell a story about a kid who grew up as basically a Nazi youth camp brainwashed kid, and he's all for Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich and whatever, and he wants to do his duty, and um, yeah. But his mom played by Scarlett Johansson, works for the Resistance, and little to his knowledge, she smuggled in a Jewish girl played by Thomasin McKenzie, who's amazing in this movie, into their home, and eventually Roman Griffin Davis's character uh, discovers her, and then they kind of like start to bond over time. It's very contentious at first, obviously, because he has his biases and hate-filled rhetoric and stuff to that he's learned to throw at her, and it like basically it's about her dispelling those myths, and they create a little storybook together, and uh like it's just such like maybe I'm not doing a good job of selling it, but it's such an amazing way to tell this story of like breaking down these barriers, and then them creating this wonderful bond together. um and then there's a wonderful thing in this movie about with cinematography about focusing in on the shoes people are wearing, and it doesn't definitely has a tragic callback that is really well done. Number one is Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I love this movie. Um, when I first saw it, I never didn't give it near as much credit. But the more and more I think about the movie, the more I think it's a perfect movie. Um, it's like the way they use cinematography to capture how people like the intimacy between people is amazing, like how people watch each other and take notice of things and listen to each other, and just like the glances they steal at one another and things like that. And just like it's also because like the main character is an artist who's doing a portrait for a woman who's about to be married, but also you see it through the eyes of an artist, and you see how like she looks at things and tries to capture different details and whatever. And every frame of this movie is a work of art, and uh, it it's such a satisfying movie, even though it has a tragic, uh, mm, sad ending. It's also really poignant and well done. Um, so yeah, number one is Portrait of a Lady on Fire. All right, now we get to the top 100 of that decade. In this decade list, I do combine certain franchise movies, certainly certain trilogies and things, and this comes up a lot in the 2010s, so I'll point those out when they come up. Number 100 is Knives Out. Number 99 is The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Number 98 is The Grand Budapest Hotel. 97, Crazy Stupid Love. 96, Steve Jobs. 95, Booksmart. 94, The Wolf of Wall Street. 93, Black Swan. 92, The Shape of Water. 91, Gone Girl. 90, Mission Impossible Fallout. 89, Snowpiercer. 88, First Man. 87, Django Unchained. 86, Bridesmaids. 85, The Farewell. 84, Moana. 83, Hugo. 82, Patterson. 81, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. Number 80 is Prisoners. 79 is Peanut Butter Falcon. 78 is Skyfall. 77 is Captain America Civil War. And 76 is Midsommar. Then we're going to get through 75 to 50. Moneyball is at 75. 74 is Paranorman. 73 is Saving Mr. Banks. 72 is Logan. 71 is Room. 70 is Gravity. 69 is Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Nice. Paddington 1 and 2 combined is at 68 together. So the combination of them together is at 68. 67 is Manchester by the Sea. 66 is Dunkirk. 65 is The Giant Mechanical Man. 64 is Creed. 63 is Uncut Gems. 62 is Train to Busan. 61 is Edge of Tomorrow. 60 is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. 59 is Black Klansman. 58 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. 57 is The Babadook. 56 is Game Night. 55 is all of the Caesar trilogy, Planet of the Apes movies. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is my favorite of the three, so that's representing all three of them together. So that ranking is all of them together in 55 spot. Number 54 is Winter's Bone. 53 is Deadpool. 52 is the Lego Movie, and 51 is A Quiet Place. All right, into 50 through 25, we got Star Wars: The Force Awakens at number 50, Eighth Grade at number 49, Nightcrawler at 48, Warrior at 47, Christopher Robin at 46, Klaus at 45, Easy A at 44, Moonlight Moonlight at 43, Black Panther at 42, Captain America Winter Soldier at 41, The Big Sick at 40, Fighting with My Family at number 39, 38 is Kick-Ass, 37 is John Wick 3, Parabellum, 36 is A Silent Voice, 35 is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, 34 is Toy Story 3, Her is at number 33, Silver Linings Playbook is 32, Nice Guys is 31, Get Out is 30, Ford versus Ferrari is 29, Drive is at 28, Endgame is 27, and Sicario is number 26. And getting into the top 25, we got 1917 at 24, Wreck-It Ralph. 23, Tigers Are Not Afraid. 22, Parasite. 21, Baby Driver. 20, we're getting into the 5 stars now too with Parasite. Jojo Rabbit is at number 20, Blind Spotting at 19. Number 18 is How to Train Your Dragon. This is the whole trilogy. put together. So this is representative of the whole trilogy. Number 17 is Avengers 2012. 16 is About Time. 15 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. 14 is Coco. 13 is Arrival. 12 is Wonder Woman, and 11 is Whiplash. Whiplash and Blind Spotting were previously in my top 10 on this list, but I've since brought those down a little bit in favor of a couple others that I decided to put into my top 10 that uh, I like more as my top 10 at this point in time. Number 10 is Lady Bird. Number 9 is Life of Pi. Number 8 is Ex Machina. Number 7 is Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Number 6 is Avengers Infinity War. Number 5 is Blade Runner 2049. Number 4 is Inception. Number 3 is La La Land. Number 2 is Mad Max Fury Road. And number 1 is Inside Out. And that's my top 100 of the 2010s. All right, so that was a good long list of my favorites of the 2010s. I hope you enjoyed it, and that's done. I'm done with the decades list for a little bit. Next week we are going to talk about the year of 2022. I'm just basically going to do my 2022 wrap ups. Tell you about my favorite movies of the year, my favorite performances of the year. I may or may not talk a little bit about TV. I probably won't be able to fit TV, but we'll see. Depends on how long some of the other stuff is. But we're going to talk a lot about my favorites of 2022, and I think we can have some fun with that. I know a bunch of people did that right at the end of the year, but um, there's a bunch of stuff that doesn't come out until right at the end of the year, and I didn't get to see certain things. So I tried to play some catch up so that I could see as many of the 2022 movies as I could before more or less finalizing my favorites of the year. There's still a few things that I need to see, but I won't be able to see them for a little bit, and I just have to deal with that. And that's fine. But I will see you guys next week to talk about 2022 movies.